Sorry?
For blood glucose regulation, which gland
So
will
insulin,
function? Which gland?
the pancreas.
The pancreas, absolutely. And insulin hormone will have a function. So, how is the blood glucose level controlled in our body? So, it's monitored by the pancreas, as you said, and pancreas acts as an endocrine gland by secreting hormones, as well as I said, it makes enzymes and releases them into the digestive system. So, it helps in digestion. Now, blood glucose concentration has to be kept at an optimum range. Like for example, there has to be a homeostasis. Just like the body temperature is controlled, it's regulated at an optimum. Just like that, blood glucose regulation has to be at a homeostatic level. Okay, I think that's relatable. Yes. So if we take a lot of food which has carbs in it, so that will result in an increase of glucose level in our bloodstream. So if the blood glucose concentration is way too high, that's the trigger when the pancreas produces insulin hormone. Okay, so what does it do? So insulin hormone is released to bring back the blood glucose level down, to decrease the level of glucose in the blood. So if there is a level of too much glucose in the blood, it can lead to the cells losing water by osmosis, and that can have a dangerous impact, right? So that has to be controlled. Okay, so insulin will stimulate the cells to take in the glucose inside them from the bloodstream. Particularly, the liver cells and the muscle cells will be stimulated by the insulin to take up these glucose inside them. And that's how the liver and the muscle cells, which have the excess glucose in them, now convert the glucose into glycogen and store them. So I'll just repeat it once more. Glucose level has increased in the blood. Okay, so pancreas will be stimulated and it will secrete insulin hormone. So insulin hormone will regulate how too much of glucose in the blood can lead to the cells to lose water by osmosis process. So if the cells start losing a lot of water, they will be dehydrated and they will die. So that's a harmful thing that has to be prevented. So how is that controlled? Insulin, which is now secreted, will stimulate the liver cells and the muscle cells to take up that excess glucose from the blood. So now the liver cells and the muscle cells take up that excess glucose. Now they convert this glucose into another form, which is glycogen. And this happens only in animals, not in plants. So glucose is converted into glycogen and then it is stored in the liver cells and the muscle cells. So when the body requires glucose, suppose you are going for a run or you are going for anything that requires strenuous physical activity, your body cells will require energy to do it. And that's when your body will need glucose. So this glycogen will again be broken down and will be released into the bloodstream in the form of glucose so that your body cells can take that up and they can utilize it. And then you don't feel inactive. You don't feel like lethargic. You have the energy.
Okay.
Right. So this is the control of blood glucose. So it goes from glucose to glycogen and from glycogen to glucose when there is a requirement of glucose in your blood. Now, there is a disease associated with way too high glucose concentration in the blood. That's diabetes. Right. So diabetes occurs in two types, type 1 and type 2. Right. Do you know anything about type 1?
Type 1 is genetic, but type 2 is you can get it from your lifestyle.
Okay, so it's much deeper than that. Yes, that's right to some extent. So I'll pitch in some details. So type 1 diabetes occurs when the pancreas fails to produce sufficient amount of insulin hormone. So the blood glucose controls do not happen. So pancreas fails. Okay. So what will happen? Why does it happen? The question is, why does pancreas fail to secrete insulin hormone? It should. So after a lot of research, it has been found that a person's own immune system will destroy the cells of the pancreas. So they cannot make sufficient amount of insulin. If the cells are destroyed, who will make those hormone? Who will make the hormone, right? So that's how pancreas fails. And type 1 diabetes is also it's usually treated with insulin injections. You have to take jabs of insulin. So that's the treatment. And let's come to the type 2. Type 2 diabetes means the body cells will not respond to the insulin hormone. So pancreas secretes insulin, but body cells fail to respond to that. Wait, when I try to write, I get stuck because I speak faster than I write. Yeah. Okay. So the body cells fail to respond to the amount of insulin produced by the pancreas. So that's a problem. So what happens if they fail to respond? Means the cells are resistant because they do not act. They do not respond. They are resistant to insulin. So they do not act in the way that they should. So this leads to high glucose levels in the blood. So this is an uncontrolled sugar level. So what are the recommendations? Intake of carbs has to be reduced by this person who has type 2 diabetes. A carbohydrate controlled diet must be followed. Regular exercises should be done. So these are the, you can say, control measures.
Isn't it also like, are you not supposed to have like overly salty things or overly sweet things?
Yes, overly sweet, obviously, and over salt, yes, so that the cells do not become dehydrated. They do not lose a lot of water. If you take in a lot of salt, that will increase the solute concentration.
Yeah, my nanny has type 2 diabetes, that's why I know.
Oh, yes. So yeah, that's a real life example. Yeah, so the solute increases. So the solvent is water. So that will decrease. So what will happen? The cell will get dehydrated. So yeah, that's not good. So intake of salt. So basically, people with type 2 diabetes are recommended to have those iodized salt rather. Rock salt and iodized salt. Also, people have thyroid imbalances. Because thyroid leads to simple goiter. The thyroid glands swell up. Okay, that's a different thing, but yeah, iodized in that. Okay, so there's another big risk factor for type 2 diabetes. That's obesity. So a person is obese because they consume a diet which is rich in carbohydrates, and there is an over secretion of insulin enzyme, insulin hormone that results to the resistance. So the cells are developing a lot of resistance. So that's how type 2 diabetes is quite a problem. Okay, so if we want to let's compare type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is the inability of the pancreas gland to produce sufficient insulin, whereas in type 2, the cells of the body become resistant to insulin hormone, or due to insufficient insulin hormone, they do not respond. And how can we treat type 1 diabetes? We have to monitor the blood glucose levels and inject insulin throughout the day. Like after consuming a meal, insulin hormone is injected. That's for type 1. For type 2, you have to maintain a low carb diet, regular exercise, and not have lots of junk. Because it leads to obesity faster. Type 2 diabetes leads to obesity faster than anything. You gain a lot of weight, and it's bad for your heart as well. So it affects the cardiovascular system also. So a lot of fat deposition occurs in the blood vessels, and that leads to cardiac arrests, etc. So everything is related. Everything is controlled, in a way. Okay, so this is the coordination. This is how blood glucose regulation occurs.